Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We have the very latest on that search for the missing Titan submersible. So we will break all of that down for you. The story that has truly captivated the nation, I think, for a lot of reasons. We also have some updates with regards to our relationship with China, their potential plans to operate in Cuba, President Biden calling Xi a dictator after what seemed to be a fairly successful visit between Tony Blinken and his counterpart in China. So we'll break all of that down for you. Also, pretty bombshell and weird situation with Justice Alito. So ProPublica published some information about him flying on a private jet of a billionaire who ended up having business before the court. He preempted their report with his own Wall Street Journal op-ed. Very odd situation, very troubling situation in a lot of ways. So we'll break that down for you. We also have another very troubling situation with test scores for teenagers falling off a cliff during the pandemic, still suffering from learning loss, still taking account of what exactly happened with all of that. Also new Elon Musk fight. Now he's saying that people who use the terms cis or cisgender as a slur could be banned from the platform. Mr. Free Speech. Interesting direction from him. Also excited to talk to Matt Stoller today about the FTC suing Amazon over some deceptive techniques that they use to try to get and keep customers in their Prime service, which is sort of key to their whole monopoly grip on power. Before we get to any of that, though, we are getting mighty close to 1 million subs on YouTube. Do you have the official count, Saagar, for us as of this moment?
Stop the count for now. Don't stop the count. All right. I got the live count up in front of me. Exactly 991,209 subscribers. That's where we're at. So we need to get to 1 million people.
As of 8:05 a.m. on Thursday, June 22nd. And as you guys know, as we mentioned before, Saagar is going out of the country very soon. He is doing a wedding ceremony in India for his relatives.
For my grandparents.
And it would be a beautiful send-off and wedding present for Saagar if we could get to 1 million subs before he leaves, because it would be kind of awkward.
That would be weird.
If you were out of the country when we actually hit the milestones. So.
I think it would be sad. You know,
subscribe. It'd be great, guys.
You can have it two ways, guys. We can either do it on Tuesday. I can be here in the studio. We can all have a lot of fun. Or I can be jet lagged. It'll be 3 a.m. in the morning. I'll wake up from a text that's excited from you guys. But then I won't be back. Until a little bit later.
Send out some like delirious tweet from your jet-lagged state at 3 a.m.
It'll be completely misspelled. So anyway, look, it's up to you. You're the ones who will decide our fate. So if you can go ahead and you can hit subscribe, it would deeply appreciate it. Get all your friends, your relatives, all of your family. After we hit 1 million, then we're all good. We have a nice, beautiful gold plaque that we want to go put over there that we've been promised. I've been admiring Kyle's. I like the way that it looks. I want to put my hands on it, the tactile feeling, and all of that. But why don't we get to the show?
Yes, indeed. So we wanted to start with the very latest on the search for the Titan submersible. As you guys, I'm sure, know at this point, 5 individuals who were basically tourists going down to view the Titanic wreckage. They lost contact with the mothership. We have no idea exactly what happened. And so the very latest we have this morning is search teams deployed remote-controlled vehicles deep into the North Atlantic. Experts are saying today is going to be a critical day in the search and rescue mission as the sub's life support supplies are starting to run low. And the reason today is so critical is because when the company lost contact with this submersible, they said they would have, a limited supply of oxygen. And basically, today is the day that that oxygen is expected to run out. And when you consider, assuming this thing is still intact, assuming that people are still alive, which I think is a big question mark to start with, even if you located them now, of course, it would take time to bring them back up to the surface. So these are really critical moments. And producer Griffin just tells us that the Coast Guard is now saying they expect everyone aboard to be deceased.
Well, they say they believe to have been run out of oxygen, unfortunately. That was just breaking this morning. So, it's very sad. There's been a lot. The nation has truly been captured, Krystal, by this submersible. And, there's actually we were thinking, can we cover this, outside of just like the, I guess, tawdry details, I suppose.
Yeah.
But the truth is that there's actually a lot to say around regulation, around the way that these companies operate. It also applies to people like Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, the Virgin Atlantic, who, to SpaceX's credit, they're focusing on NASA and the space program. Like Blue Origin, Virgin Atlantic, and many of these other services, their entire mission is just shooting rich people out into space. This is effectively the same thing, except going deep underground. And well, you know, whenever it comes to these international covenants around submersibles and the way that this technology and all that is governed, we've actually learned quite a bit, and it's not great, unfortunately.
I mean, apparently it's basically the wild, wild west. I mean, the SpaceX thing is an interesting point because they did just have kind of a catastrophe in terms of, you know, they used a launch pad that wasn't ready in time the way that Elon wanted it to be, but he went forward with it. There was massive debris. There was clouds of ash and soot and whatever. So I think there's a lot of questions there about some coziness between regulators and between the billionaires and company executives. But to be specific to this one, some of the details that have come out about the way that this submersible was constructed are really shocking. And there were a lot of warnings in advance that this was not remotely prepared to go as deep to the depths of the bottom of the ocean where the Titanic is located. So there was a news report, I think it was about a year ago, where a journalist for CBS actually went on one of these trips. And so you get a glimpse inside of this submersible and how it's, you know, really cobbled together with low budget, off-the-shelf components. Just take a look at a little bit of that report.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
Oh, take your shoes off. That's customary.
Okay. Wow. Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button. That's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
The Titan is the only 5-person sub in the world that can reach Titanic depths, 2.4 miles below the sea. It's also the only one with a toilet, sort of. And yet, I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components.
I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
So the individual that he is interviewing there, that the journalist is interviewing there, is the CEO of the company that built this submersible. And I mean, it's a classic story of human hubris. He thought he didn't need to get this thing classed. He didn't need to get it evaluated and actually like certified to the depths that they wanted to take people. Thought he could cut corners in all these ways and save on costs to make the trip, quote unquote, more affordable. I suppose tickets were still $250,000. Why would you want to cut corners on safety when this is such an incredibly dangerous activity? And, you know, you get a sense of his thinking also in this same report. Let's take a listen to how he justified some of the decision making.
It seems like this submersible has some elements of MacGyver-y jerry-riggedness. I mean, you're putting construction pipes as ballast.
I don't know if I'd use that description of it, but there's certain things that you want to be buttoned down. So the pressure vessel is not MacGyver at all because that's where we work with Boeing and NASA and the University of Washington. Everything else can fail. Your thrusters can go, your lights can go, you're still going to be safe.
I'm the king of the surface vessel!
There's a limit. You know, at some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. At some point, you're going to take some risk, and it really is a risk-reward question. I said, I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules.
I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules. And basically the justification, and you know, it's expected that the CEO was also aboard and has likely lost his life on this submersible as well. But basically the justification, Saagar, was like, oh, these regulators, they're too slow, we're too innovative, they can't keep up with what we're doing. But it wasn't just the like bureaucratic suits who might have raised some questions here. There was at least one employee who was a whistleblower. There was a slew of experts who unanimously said, this is dangerous, this is a terrible idea, but he pushed for it anyway.
Yeah, let's put that up there on the screen where you're referencing, which is that 2018, there was actually a lawsuit, a safety lawsuit, saying that there was a, quote, a potential danger to passengers. And OceanGate, actually vociferously fought back against it because they fired an employee, David Lockridge, after he expressed concern about the safety. They actually sued him, saying he had breached his employment contract by disclosing confidential information with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, aka OSHA. What they said is that Lockridge said that he had been wrongfully terminated and his actions were aimed at ensuring the safety of passengers on the submersible called the Titan, which is now currently missing. I mean, my major takeaway throughout this entire thing, Krystal, is that your use of the word hubris is perfect. There's also a fundamental mismatch in terms of this guy's ideology, because the problem is he's trying to drive down costs. And that is actually fine whenever we're talking about normal consumer products in which you are competing with a vast swath of people. The majority of the people who were on this and were customers are extraordinarily wealthy.
Right.
Bringing costs down from $500,000 to $250 means nothing to them. They don't even think twice about spending $1 million on tickets versus $2 million versus $3 million.
Yeah.
For them, it's about the experience. And if, we were talking with our producer, ironically, he could have made it a safer and a more luxurious experience, and he probably would have made the exact same amount of money, because the current environment that look, if these people are still alive or were alive, at any point for some time, it was hell on earth down there. I mean, we're talking about the size of what's been described of a minivan.
Which from the pictures, I feel like is pretty generous.
It's a very generous minivan. That's like a compact SUV, I think, if you ask me.
It's like one of those European minivans that are like
that's
this big.
European minivan. We are also talking about no toilet. We're talking about one guy who had actually ridden on the submarine had said previously that you have to be able to sit cross-legged for 10 hours and bear extreme discomfort. And listen, I get it. I'm the type of person where if I had this type of money, I would absolutely do something like this. I think the Titanic's cool. I like exploration. I think I don't think the idea necessarily is bad. I've seen some people like, why would anyone want to do this? Listen, I think it's awesome. And one of the guys on there had done a lot of stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, as somebody who also has often, dreamed or thought about doing things like this, you have to do a tremendous amount of research for safety, and you also have to make sure that you're going with a reputable person. And unfortunately, it really seems like OceanGate, the company, invested a hell of a lot more in marketing around the Titan than it did around the actual safety on this. So it's a good meta story too, to look at, sometimes things are too good to be true. Sometimes, look, I think a lot of regulation is dumb, is annoying. We run a business here. It can be an absolute massive pain. However, we're not taking people down to the bottom of the ocean. And when you are, I do actually think there's quite a few things like checklists that need to exist.
Boxes that were checked.
There's a reason only nation states usually are the ones who are capable of doing something like this. And as we are all finding, whenever the Titan goes missing, there's like two craft, I believe, on planet Earth that are even capable of going to go get them.
Right.
One of them is French, and the other is part of the U.S. Navy. But then getting them there in time is, is such a massive pain. So that was the other. They did not have a proper safety and contingency around this, should a massive event like this occur, which again, that's what the U.S. Navy actually has. Like, they don't just send people down to the bottom of the sea without plans and redundancies that exist. This was MacGyvered in the worst sense, in my opinion.
Well, and that was one of the red flags that employee who was a whistleblower who was fired and sued, that was one of the red flags that he raised. He expressed concern the company planned for the sub to rely on an acoustic monitoring system to detect if the hull was breaking down or about to fail. That wouldn't provide much help in an emergency, he claimed, because the acoustic analysis would only alert people about imminent problems milliseconds before an implosion. I mean, of the various things that could have gone wrong, they could have had an electrical failure. They could have had a fire on board. They could have gotten caught up in the Titanic wreckage itself and been unable to go back up to the surface. They could have gotten caught up in a fishing net. Any number of things could have happened. Or the hull and the body of the submersible could have failed and basically, instant implosion. Frankly, for the sake of the people here, to me, that would be the least cruel way to go, because at least it's over in an instant. I think part of why people have been so captivated by the story is thinking about being trapped in that thing, counting down the hours until your oxygen runs out that's just like literal nightmare scenario. So it's horrific. You know, the one sign that they had that was giving people some hope is there was some sounds that were detected, some banging sounds that
From
were
an airplane,
detected underwater that repeated. You know, on Tuesday they heard it. I heard it again on Wednesday. The theory was that these would be the kind of noises that maybe if they were banging the ship up against something underneath the water to help rescuers be able to find them, perhaps that's what was going on. And maybe that is the case, but at this point, it's becoming clear they just ran out of time. One other story that came out in the New York Post that was it's a firsthand account from another adventurer who went on a different one of these missions. And Saagar, he called it a suicide mission because of his experience. He said this was a Bavarian entrepreneur. He said it was a suicide mission back then. The first submarine did not work. Then a dive at 1,600 meters, which is nowhere close to how deep they were going for the Titanic, had to be abandoned. He explained they ended up launching 5 hours late due to electrical issues. He thinks that's what's to blame for the Titan cruise issues here. Not only that, but right before the voyage, the bracket of the stabilization tube, which balances the sub, seems kind of important, tore and had to be reattached with zip ties. That was the type of operation they were running here. Cobbled together, you know, very little concern for safety. There was a slew of experts who wrote a letter raising these concerns, but because there was no regulation, and he just decided, the CEO here, Stockton Rush, just decided to push forward anyway and not get the submersible evaluated, not get it classed. You know, it appears to have ended in complete catastrophe for these individuals who were on board.
And just to give everyone an idea of the hubris of this guy, listen to the way he talks about his hiring decisions. Let's take a listen.
When I started the business, one of the things you'll find, there are other sub operators out there, but they typically have gentlemen who are ex-military submariners, and you'll see a whole bunch of 50-year-old white guys. I wanted our team to be younger, to be inspirational, and I'm not going to inspire a 16-year-old to go pursue marine technology. But a 25-year-old, who's a sub pilot or a platform operator, or one of our techs, can be inspirational.
Yeah, Krystal, why would you want to hire a bunch of people who are experienced on submarines to run your submarine company? I mean, you know, who doesn't want somebody just straight out of school with no experience in a highly technical environment, aboard a vessel which imminent death is always a possibility, and people who have developed redundancies and systems to make sure over the last 75 years that something like this doesn't ever happen?
Well, and I think we know the real reason why he
because
didn't
he didn't
want these
pay.
people. Because he didn't want to pay. And because he knew they would cause problems for him, like the one guy who was a whistleblower who was like, what the hell are you thinking here? So he needed young, inexperienced 25-year-olds who he could frame as quote-unquote inspirational. But the real reason was he wanted them cheap and he wanted them easy to manipulate. And, you know, here we are.
Listen.
Sad story.
We can hold out hope. You know, as the Coast Guard says, you can never underestimate the will to live. I'm obsessed with survival stories. This would be one of the all-time greats if they do walk out of there. That said, all the decks stacked against them. We've got the Coast Guard estimating they ran out of oxygen. One of the only ways they'd be able to extend their oxygen is if they were starting to breathe slower. They would actually have to regulate their breathing. The other reason, you know, a lot of people were thinking about Apollo 13, for example. Well, here's the difference. The people on board Apollo 13 were highly trained astronauts who had trained for 2 years or so, actually more, had flight test pilots who had been through multiple failures, were experienced aerospace engineers who were capable of, you know, maintaining the thought needed at that time, ex-military, and then be able to listen and communicate with NASA to finally get themselves back. That's the other one that's ruling out of Titan's favor. They don't have the ability to communicate and to say exactly what is wrong with them. So, like I said, the deck is really stacked against them. The Coast Guard currently estimating that they've run out of oxygen. I'm assuming search and rescue will maintain operations for the next couple of days at the very least. You don't want to necessarily just call it, but look, there's a very human story here for us to all to learn from. Sometimes if it's too good to be true, sometimes if it is regulated, it's for a good reason, and sometimes if it sounds too good to be true, it is.
If you're putting your life in the hands of an individual who, you know, whose technical capacity is required, make sure they're like the nerdiest, most boring, attention to detail person ever. This guy read like a sort of like charismatic salesperson.
Yes.
And clearly, you know, did not have that attention to detail.
unfortunate.
So it is a sad and disastrous story. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.